Okay, so in this video I want to handle creating widgets and custom components so that we can kind of get the chatbot to display anything that we want it to. And I also want to merge that with getting data from an API and putting that into the chatbot state and then rendering it to the screen. So basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to use JSON placeholder API, and we are going to use the /todos endpoint, which will just give us a list of to-dos. So in our chatbot, what we want to have happen is that when we write in show me my to-dos, we want the chatbot to respond to that with a message and then display the component that's responsible for getting that data and putting it into state and then rendering out the to-dos. So let's get started on that. We'll start by going to the config and we'll add or remove this entry in the state, and we'll add a new entry that says to-dos, and it's going to be an empty array. And the next thing we are going to be doing is we are going to create a new component called to-dos, and it's just going to be a functional component, and for now we'll return a div hello world. Okay, so we got that. Now in the, let's see, you know what I want to do is I want to go to the config and I want to register this as a widget. So let's do widgets, which is a config property, and we'll give that a object. Sorry, we're gonna give it an array, and it's going to contain objects. Now, widgets are components that you create on your own, and then you register them in the config because we want the widget to be decorated with some things that only the chatbot can give us. So basically we wanted to retrieve state. We wanted to receive some methods that will help make our lives easier. And so to make that happen, we need to define it as a function that we can call at a later point in time. So let's head over to the documentation, and we can go up to the config example, and then here I want to grab the first entry, and I'm gonna paste it into the config, and then we're gonna talk about it. Whoops. Let's try to do it properly. Paste that in. All right. So here we have a widget object, and it has three properties. It has the widget name, which is a name that we give it to refer to it later when we want to use it. It has the widget function, which is a function that returns a JSX element. So it returns the component that we've created. And we also have a map state to props property that tells the chatbot which state that we want to give to this component. So we defined to-dos up here, and what we want to do is to have this component have access to that state. So to do that, we'll say to-dos, and that will map this piece of state to whatever component we put in here. Now it says overview, and we want to change that because the component that we created was called to-dos. So let's import that. and we'll name this one to-dos, and we'll also put the correct component here. All right. So now we have a registered widget that we can use in our React chatbot. And the way we use it is by adding an options property to the create chatbot message. So let's do that here. And then later we'll change it so it actually is in response to a message. But for development purposes, I like to just put it right here and then I can see what I'm working with. So I'll say widget, and I want to specify the name of the widget that we just registered. So I want to say to-dos. And save that. And if we head to the chatbot, then we can see here that nothing's happening. So we need to go and check out the to-dos component. To-dos, it returns hello world. It's, you know what, actually let's go to the documentation. I might have gotten the thing here wrong. No, that looks right. Let's see, config, create chatbot message, hello world, widget, to-dos, widget name to-dos. So perhaps this is just hidden because yeah. So it's here, it's just invisible. So let's fix that. And we're gonna give it to-dos CSS, and we'll import that file. So we just created a CSS file here, and we're just importing it directly into this JSX file. So now we can say to-dos widget, and in the CSS we'll say to-dos widget and color. So that should make the text visible for us. Sweet. Now let's go ahead and see if we can console log the props that is passed into this component. And we'll take a look at it. So let's open the developer tools. And we can see the props object right here. And we've given the component, by registering it in the config, we've injected this component with some properties. And because we defined it as a function, we're able to do that. So you can see now we have the to-dos array here, which is currently empty. We have a set state function, which allows us to manipulate the internal state of the chatbot. It's the same function that's passed to the action provider. We have an action provider here that is the same that we've defined earlier. And we also have a scroll into view function, which we can call if the component that we are rendering is overflowing the container. We might want to scroll the container here to the bottom, so it's always correctly aligned. So that's the properties that are being passed into this component. Now what we want to do is we want to fetch the data from the API, and we want to put it into the chatbot state. So let's take a look at how we'll do that. So I'll just grab this link right here to this endpoint, and we want to use a hook called use effect, and we want to use get useState as well from React. And then we will actually, no, we will not be using useState because we'll be setting this in the chatbot state, not local state in this component. So we just need useEffect. So we're going to say useEffect, and we're going to give it a callback function, and we're going to give it an empty dependency array. So we just want to run this function when the component is being loaded up. So the first time it mounts, we want to run this function. And what we are going to do is we're going to say fetch, and we're going to say then res JSON, and then we will take that data and we'll do, let's console log it for now. And in the source, I'm going to do I'm just going to set up a prettier RC so that I can get some auto formatting here. Okay. There we go. Much better. So we're using useEffect here to run a function whenever this component gets mounted. And then fetch will take care of going to this URL and retrieve the data. And fetch first returns a result that we are converting to JSON. And then we'll have the data here and we'll log it out in the console. So let's go back to the browser, and we can see here on the left hand side that we've gotten all 200 of the to-dos, and we're ready to put that into our state. But first we might want to trim that down a little bit, so maybe we'll just grab 5 of those to-dos. So let's head back to our component, and we'll say that const 5 first to-dos equals data slice 05 06. And then we are going to be using the setState function that is passed in from the properties. So let's destructure setState from props, and we want to do setState, and we need to give it a callback because we don't want to overwrite state. We just want to add to it. So we need to preserve everything that was there from before. So we're spreading out the state. So we're taking everything that's in the state and kind of saying that, okay, so we're creating a new state object, but take everything from the old state and put it in. And then we are going to do to-dos, and we are going to say that to-dos equal 5 first to-dos. So this is a array because data.slice will return to us an array with the first 5 items, and then we'll set the chatbot state. We'll copy all the old state over, and we'll set the to-dos property to be equal to 5 first to-dos. So after that, if we console log props state to-dos here, we should be getting the 5 first. All right, so let's see. I think it's just a property directly on the, yeah, it is. It's not under state, so it's just props to-dos. And it seems like it took the 6 first. Oh, doesn't matter. 5 or 6. So you can see here we start off with an empty array, and then once we fetch the data and put it into the state, we're re-rendering, and we have an array of 6 to-dos. So let's go ahead and put those on the screen. And we are going to just map over them in a list and use their IDs as keys. So we're going to create a function called render to-dos. And we're going to say props to-dos map. And in here we're going to put a unordered list, and we want the render to-dos to produce 6 list items and then insert that into the unordered list. So inside of here we'll do this render to-dos, and then we want this function to return list items with the to-do text. So let's say this is going to be to-do list widget list item, and this is going to be to-dos widget list. And then we're going to give this the key of to-do .id, and we're going to say to-do, and let's go back and check the title, and we're going to say to-do title inside of there. So now if we go back to our render to-dos is not defined. That's not good. And it's not a class, so this doesn't make sense. So that should take care of that. And we'll refresh here. Render to-dos is not defined. Oh, of course. So when you're used to working with class-based components, you might find yourself forgetting some of the things that functional components need. So here we need to add const in front of render to-dos because it's obviously a variable, and it's just storing this function. So we're storing a function in the variable const render to-dos. So that should take care of it. It looks like we still have one final error. It says expected assignment and instead saw an expression, and I know that we need to return whatever we are doing from render to-dos, and we need to return our list item. Okay, so as you can see now, we have the to-dos rendered to the screen, and we can start making it pretty if we want to. And we won't spend too much time on this, but let's see if we can do just a few basic things here. So let's do margin 0, padding 0 on the actual list. And then the to-do list item and list style type none as well. And the list item, font size 1 rem, margin 8 pixels 0. Ooh, that will just give the a little bit of margin on the top and bottom, and none to the left and right. And we'll say margin text align left, and yeah, I think that probably works for now. I mean, these to-dos don't really make any sense, but this is all about just learning how to fetch the data and display it through a custom component, so it doesn't really matter that much what is being displayed. But we have it here now, so let's go ahead and make it so that the chatbot responds with this when we request it. So let's go back to config, and we'll remove the options object here and restore it to just saying hello world to begin with. And we'll head over to the message parser, and we'll add a new clause here, and we'll say if lowercase includes to-dos, then we want to say this action provider, and we haven't created this method yet, so for now let's just comment this out, and we'll head over to the action provider. So in the action provider we'll say to-dos handler, and I'll say message equals this, create chatbot message, sure, here's your to-dos, and we'll give it the options object, and we'll say widget to-dos, and we'll say this set chatbot message. So now we've made a handler, and the handler just makes the chatbot say, sure, here's your to-dos, and then it renders the widget that we've been working on with this message. So if we go back to our message parser now, and we say this action provider handle to-dos, and make sure that that was the same name, it's not, so we need to make sure that those two match up. To-dos handler. So now, if everything works correctly, we should be able to write anything that has to-dos in it into the chatbot and get the response in return, where the chatbot renders the widget component. So let's see if it works. Perfect. So we asked for our to-dos, and we triggered the correct handler from the message parser, and we were able to show our widget onto the screen and also fetch data, put it into state, and have that state trigger a render of our component. So this has been quite a long episode, but I think it's really interesting as well, because with this knowledge you can do a lot of different things, and you can customize your chatbots to display really any kind of data that you might want to display to your users. So thanks for tuning in, and this is it for now.